last week, and we're going to spend some time in God's Word. So if you weren't here last week, we're going to go back to Ecclesiastes chapter 2. So for just a quick recap, the wisest man under the sun, King Solomon, wrote this book, this long letter, and no matter what we may think about the book of Proverbs or a lot of the wise things that has already been written, the lens in which we are seeing Solomon right now is that he is saying some pretty foolish things because his focus is off. Last week we talked about wise living, and it was interesting that when I was looking for a verse that really brought it together, what wise living really is, it came from the book of Proverbs that he also wrote. And he says here in chapter 2, verses 6 through 8, "For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He's a shield to those who walk in integrity, guarding the paths of justice and watching over the way of his saints." Now, it's interesting that it says, "For the Lord gives wisdom," because we know that Solomon was given wisdom by God to lead his people. But then, in verse 7, he says, "He, as in the Lord, stores up sound wisdom for the upright." There's a little difference there. There's a lot of wise people under the sun. But God stores up sound wisdom for his children, for his folks, for his saints. So the world can give you a bunch of wisdom, right? Bankers have great wisdom when it comes to finance, but it doesn't mean that their finances are going to add up properly in the kingdom economy. It might add up well in this economy under the sun, but not kingdom. Right? You have relationship gurus that talk about all these different things that would make your relationship great. And God simply says, very, very simply, when it comes to marriage, submit yourselves one to another out of the fear of the Lord. You do that and allow God's word to lead your marriage, and in the kingdom family, you'll be just fine. Now, I'm going to define wisdom again. Next slide. Because when we hear wisdom, we automatically think, oh, this is what God gives, so it has to be perfect. What wisdom was, the wisdom that was given to Solomon was skill, discernment, understanding, shrewdness. What we just read is that sound wisdom is given to us, his children. Next slide. Charles Stanley gave this really cool definition about what wisdom really is. It says, the capacity to view things from God's viewpoint and to respond to them accordingly. Kind of goes back to what Proverbs was saying, that he stores up sound wisdom for the upright. Think of wisdom as a cloud that you can only tap into when the sun, the S-O-N, is shining upon it and he disseminates it. Now, in Colossians chapter 3, starting at verse 1, it says this, "If then you have been raised with Christ," see, we're talking about a wisdom that is available to his children. It's a different wisdom. You can have wisdom of the world, but as we're going to get into in just a moment, the wisdom from the world is vanity. Do you still have your little blower? See, the wisdom of the world, I brought my diffuser last week, and you're just grasping at things. And the wisdom of the world is these bubbles here. They're amazing. They're amazing to look at. And if we had kids in here, they would be going nuts. But here's the problem. We have adults that chase after bubbles as well. We have bubbles that we chase after. We're going to get into a bubble today that many of us struggle with. Before we get there, though, I want to finish reading to you from Colossians chapter 3. It says, "If then you've been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God." This is key now. Set your minds on things that are above, not on the things that are on earth. I had to title this message a little differently. Next slide. This is where adults struggle. Right here. This is where we struggle. All day long, we become adults, and the bubbles that we chase after are usually the bubbles of work. Because work tells us who we are, right? Because if you speak to someone who's a farmer, not only is that the job that he does, but that's his title now. If somebody is working in the field of psychology, what are they called? A psychologist. If they're in medicine, what are they called? Right? So, our identity, this is what the world likes to do, is usually found in what we do. The problem is when we are found in that space will also dictate our value over and over and over again. That's why many men will literally work themselves to death. We have a culture that men will rather work and provide for their children than raise them. If you can't say amen, you can say ouch, as Vodi Bakum would say. See, in my house, it's that same struggle. So don't think I'm telling you like I don't understand it. Because it costs money to live. It costs money to do things. It costs money to give your children a better life. But by what standard are we classifying better? Are we classifying better by the kingdom or by this world? The S-U-N or the S-O-N? There's a question that my wife and I ask each other. And we've been doing it probably before we moved here. It just leapt into my spirit. And it's this: how much is enough? How much is enough money? And if you sit down with any financial advisor, the first thing they're going to ask you is to tell them how much you got coming in and what you got coming out. Or going out, because they're not usually coming out. They're going to just go. For some of us, we don't know even that. We don't know how much our bills add up to, and we don't know what our take-home money is. So what we do is we work and we work and we work until we feel comfortable. But since we're family, let me ask you, anybody in here ever feel comfortable with their finances in this economy? Vincent, stop playing, boy. Stop playing. Stop playing. No, because one week you're going to pay $8 for eggs. And the next week you're going to pay $19 for 5 dozen eggs. They don't get no warning. So what we do, because we don't have a base from where our information comes from for our finances, We allow the very same standard to keep us on the wheel like rats. So I'm going to ask you this. For those that like taking notes, I want you to write that question down. How much is enough? For the parents, it goes a little further than that. It's not just finances. How much time are you willing to stay away from your children? How much time are you willing to stay away from your spouse? And here's one, because we're going to get into this here. I cannot stand this earpiece. Can I just use this? Thank you. Thank you. Can y'all hear me? I guess my ears are just too small for this thing. Something. But how much is enough? It's a question that we should be asking ourselves regularly. Because when we understand what our needs are, we can make better plans. And if our needs are, I need the affection from my spouse, I need X amount of time to train up my children, and I need to have this much time to make sure I make this much money, the economy in our families and in the kingdom starts to make more sense. But we live in a time where it is okay for dads to stay away from their kids as long as they're working. I'm a dad. Sorry, I'm stepping on toes today. But let me tell you, the greatest crisis in our world has been facing for decades is not that our kids aren't going to Disney World. And it's not that they don't have a four-wheeler or entertainment centers. It's fatherlessness. I've dealt with so many kids that say, no, I have a two-parent household. I'll never see your dad. How often do you see your dad? And they can't tell me. But they know the bills get paid. Moms, you're not off the hook. Because in this economy, many times moms work too. And that's not what we're called to do. We're not called to spend so much time outside of the home that other people are raising our kids, or we're hoping that while they're in school, they're being parented as well. So, let's get to the nitty-gritty. Let's see how Solomon saw work. Next slide, please. Ecclesiastes 2, starting at verse 18, and it says, I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me, and who knows whether he will be wise or a fool. Yet he will be master of all for which I toiled, and use my wisdom under the sun. This is also vanity. He said, I hated all my toil. Not because he didn't have a lot, but because of who he was potentially leaving it to. Next slide. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun. Because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and understanding and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. Next slide. What has a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night, his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. Next slide. There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? But watch what he says next. For the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and striving after wind. Next slide. What is he saying? Why work so hard? What use is it anyway? All I have done will be meaningless one day, and worse yet, it will be left to someone who hasn't got the sense or work ethic to do good with it. And yet, in the book of Proverbs, chapter 13:22, it says this: a good man leaves an inheritance to his children, to his children's children, and the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous. How can he say in one moment that he hated all this toil because of who he was going to be left to, but earlier in his life, when he had a little more clarity, when he wasn't all poisoned by all the other gods that his wives were worshiping and all this other stuff, he's like, man, I want to be able to leave something to my children's children. Where's the divide there? It's the focus in which we do the first part. The focus in which we work. Why are we working? As to whose glory are we working? Are we working so that we could be rich, fat, and fabulous? Or do we work so that he can be seen, glorified, magnified, and the world could say through the work that they've seen, that God that you worship is awesome? See, I think about my kids, and for those that kind of know my parenting, I'm pretty hard on my kids because I won't have bratty kids. I just won't. You'll go without if you're a brat in my house. And if you get too far out of line, I will throw everything I bought away just to show you it ain't yours, it's mine. But isn't that what we do if we are not working as on to the Lord? We're just throwing stuff into the wind anyway, because we're not storing up our treasures in heaven. What we're doing is we're trying to build our own kingdom here, where things will be destroyed, where the very next generation, just like Solomon, 40 years of peace, and within a week of his son taking over, kingdom splits. 3 days. That's all it took for everything that he built to be split, just like that. I have a theory. Wasn't a good daddy to the one son that was going to be taken over. How do we know this? Was he a good example to his boy? How many women did he have? 1,000. 1,000 women. Many of them being his wives. What else did he do? He built his wives' gods' altars. And as he grew older, he drifted further and further away from the God that blessed him. That is what happens when our focus is not on God and the stuff. Let me give you a 2024 example. When your boss comes to you and says, listen, I got this promotion for you. I know you're already working about 55 hours a week and you keep telling me you need to be home more, but listen, I'm going to give you a $50,000 bonus. And then I'm going to be paying you an extra $5,000 a month, but you're going to have to work 70 hours a week. And many times, We're like, man, can you imagine what I can give my kids if I work that extra time? What happens to our children? What happens to the call on our life if all we're doing is chasing after the wind and not growing the things of God? Many times we have these internal dialogues trying to make room for bad decisions. Next slide. I really like this quote. Jerry Bridges wrote this book called The Pursuit of Holiness that I'm listening to right now. And he said, introspection can easily become the tool of Satan. My dad, before he died, he always told me, men take time to be introspective, to take just think about your week, think about your month, take time at the end of the day to really look at what did you get done. The problem is when you're focused in the wrong areas, your introspection will only qualify your flesh. It will never even tap into the spirit or ask for a different side of the story. So the enemy likes to do that. How do we know? He did that with Eve. She was looking at that tree and that fruit was like, man, it looked good. Yeah, it looked tasty. It looked like it'll make me feel good. Matter of fact, what'd you say? It'll make me more like him? But she never went back to where she got the initial word from. So let me talk to the wives. Your husband has a call on his life. His call is to lead. The Lord is looking to him to lead. If you do anything outside of what your husband is saying, now you have caused division. We saw that with Eve. She clearly knew what Adam was told because Adam must have told her. But she did not hang on to that word. Solomon had all the wisdom in the world, but his focus was still off. It was divided. Divided by all those women and divided by all the different gods that he was being exposed to, that he was literally studying. So watch this. Next slide. What was he missing? Looking at life from the wrong perspective. Simple and plain. If your life is only found in this world, then it's the world that is going to satisfy you. That is why it is so hard for us to remove certain areas in our life, because we're not checking in with God and His Word and trusting that the same God that commands it will also supply all that you need to accomplish it. Anybody memorize Psalm 23:1? The Lord is my shepherd. That's a declaration. And then there's a promise. I shall not want. See, if He's your shepherd, He's also your supplier. He's your provider. He's the one that does. He's the one that gives. He's the one that guides. He's the one that protects. He's the one that's going to give you the wisdom. We learned that in Proverbs chapter 2. He stores sound wisdom up. All He's asking you to do is come and ask for it. Even James tells us that. If any man lacks wisdom, let him ask God. But God is usually the final step when we've already slipped so far down and we say, okay, God, help me now. It should be the first. When we continue to go into these spaces, we continue to lose the very things we need. Now, Alan and Pam, here's your answer. It says, he was lacking 3 things. Next slide. He had wisdom because God gave it to him, but he never sought God for God's wisdom in the moments. So for those that are taking notes, You should be seeking for God's wisdom in all things. Secondly, when you seek him, he's going to give you peace. And that peace that he gives surpasses all understanding. It makes no sense unless you are willing to be in fellowship with him. Let me qualify those. James chapter 3 says this, starting at verse 13. It says, "Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes from above, but it's earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder in every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace." James 3:13 through 18. If you want to know if you are in a space of receiving God's wisdom, those are your qualifiers. Now, the wisdom is granted to a very specific group of people, the believers. You can get a bunch of earthly wisdom, but it's not going to add up the same way as from God. If we're living for his glory, then we also want his wisdom. But see, we also want the peace of God, which Isaiah 26:3 is one of my life verses. He will keep them in perfect peace whose mind stays on him. We wonder why we don't have peace? It's because we're focused on everything we see. And Colossians chapter 3 says to set our affections on those things that are above and not on this earth. Now the fellowship. The fellowship was what wraps all that stuff together. The fellowship. In Psalm 32:8 says, "I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you." Anybody ever felt like you just lost in the sauce? Just don't know what's going on. You just can't get it right. Seek the Lord. It's in that fellowship with him that he reveals things, that he shows you things, and he also gives you the strength and the energy to keep moving forward. When we walk with God, he teaches and reveals to us the things that matter. When we're outside of him, our flesh is just longing to be fulfilled. But you still have to be open to that correction and direction. Now, why do we need those things? Because we want to do things that last. Next slide. What work will last? Only God-glorifying work will last. All right? One of my favorites that reminds me of what kind of work I need to be doing is Matthew 5:16. Letting your light so shine among men that they would see your good works and glorify the Father, which is in heaven. Right? So the stuff that I do needs to make him look good. So then that would mean what I do, how I do, and why I do it makes him look good. We can't do things that are going to glorify him out of selfish ambition. If your testimony starts with I, rethink it. If your work or your work schedule starts with I, rethink it. What is God calling you to do and how is he calling you to do it? But we also want to work type of work that comes from the heart. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. You want to work knowing that your boss is not your boss. Your boss is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He gives you the ethical standard by which you work. And you want to have a commitment to your work. If you say you're going to do something, do it. Commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established. Now, we have to make sense of that, because if we are not in fellowship with God, we don't have his peace, we don't have his wisdom, we don't have his understanding, we don't even know what he wants us to do. But when we have that fellowship and we're doing what he calls us to do, we're in line with him, and he will establish the very thing that you felt he was drawing you to. He will do it. Anything that we do outside of him is going to crumble. Lest the Lord build the house we build in vain. All is vanity under the sun. And all is God honoring and glorifying when we do it as unto the S-O-N. There is a process. As you continue, now I challenge you to continue to read the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, Pastor Eric will be back next week, and he will pick up in chapter 3. Some of y'all have been waiting for chapter 3. Chapter 3 is a very, very famous area. But see, wrong perspective skews everything, like an airplane that is off 1 degree from the time it leaves. By the time it gets to where it's supposed to be, it's way off. And that is what happens to many of us when we are not paying attention to what God is saying. So we know, next slide, we know that no matter what happens, when we commit ourselves to God, if our focus is off, we won't end up where we need to. However, when we commit ourselves to God, our focus changes. So the why and how we work changes as well. When our gaze is on him, he shows us what to do, how to do it, and our why, because we know that his love is so great, and it changes why we want to do things. So it changes everything that we do. Next slide. Because we know that Solomon's conclusion of everything is solid. But he went through all these different spaces of ruining his life because he didn't go here first. In the end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Solomon struggled spiritually because his focus was on himself and indulging himself. If you want to know where your flesh really is, fast. Stop eating for a while. Stop listening to music that's not God-honoring. Stop watching movies that you ain't got no business watching. If you wouldn't watch the movie with Jesus sitting next to you, probably shouldn't be watching it anyway, because he's there. He knows. But when we strip carnal things out of our diet, we will see the cravings within 24 hours. The things that our bodies crave are usually the things that need to be killed. We cannot be people pursuing God and not pursuing his wisdom daily. It doesn't go together. You can't say, I love Jesus, but you don't go after his wisdom and instruction for the day. I had a conversation with someone at work, and she told me, I pray to Jesus all the time. And I believe that the stars and the sun and all those things I can pray to as well. So I asked her a very simple question, and then it got a little heated. I asked her, what Jesus you talking about? Because my God says to have no other gods before him. My God says you should not be praising or worshiping a created thing when the created thing has no mouth, no ears, nor can it even move. But oftentimes, when our focus is off, we will begin to accept anything that makes us feel good. If you wanted a summary of the entire book of Ecclesiastes, it is this. You ready? I have come to the very end of my life, indulging in everything and ending up more empty than when I started. What say you at the end of your day? Are you more full or are you more empty?